You guys, I just checked my YouTube and this morning we were at 1,990 and we just hit 2,000. So thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed recently. Hey, what's up you guys? I'm Caitlin from Leave Me Alone Plants, and today we are going to be talking about one of my all-time favorite plants, and that is the Satin Pothos. Now, I actually have two very similar plants here. I have the traditional Satin Pothos, and then I also have the Pothos Exotica. I know that they constantly are very easily to confuse. I honestly thought that they were the same plant for the longest time. I'll get into the differences a little further in this video, but with that said, if you have one or the other, the care for them is going to be about the same. So if you're interested in learning about the Satin Pothos or the Exotica, then keep on watching and we're gonna get into it right now. Okay, so real quick so I can put this other plant down, basically the difference that you're going to see in the Satin Pothos versus the Exotica, and hopefully it'll show up on camera, at least in my opinion, the Exotica tends to have a lot more silver. I know this one also, I believe, goes by the Silver Splash Pothos, and that's pretty clear in looking at it. It really truly is just a silvery looking plant with more so splashes of green, whereas this one is more so a green leaf with splashes of silver. So minor difference there. I do also tend to find that the Exotica tends to grow a little bit of larger and thicker leaves. I don't know if that's actually true. That's just the experience that I've had with them. In my shop before, I have had a giant, okay, not giant, but pretty large Exotica, and I remember the leaves on that were bigger than the size of my hand. They were quite large, and yeah, just overall both really gorgeous plants, slight difference. So if you were not sure which one you had, hopefully that helps you out. Now, just talking about the leaves a little more on these, I think for me, one of the absolute coolest characteristics of these, not only do they truly feel satiny, as their name would suggest, but additionally, if you hold them up to the light, they almost glisten and sparkle in the sunlight. Now, I don't think that there's really truly any way I'm going to be able to replicate this on camera, but if you have one of these, hold your plant up to the light and you'll be able to see it if you kind of shift it around, and if you don't have one, then I'm sorry, I guess you just have to go out and get one. But yeah, in terms of where these guys are native to, they're native to areas like Indonesia and the Philippines, so habitats that are going to be warmer, a little more humid. Of course, that will guide us in how they are going to want to be cared for, but with that said, I do find that these plants are incredibly adaptable. I think it's like the ongoing joke that the golden pothos is the plant that nobody can kill. They are related, of course, to that plant, and while I will say that they are a little more finicky than the standard golden pothos, I do think that overall they are still definitely a plant for beginners, super easy to care for, and again, just very flexible to different environments. So starting out with water, to address the elephant in the room, yes, this guy is thirsty. He is in need of water. I tend to water these about every week. However, with that said, depending on your exact, temperature and light situation, that may vary for you. But for me, I find about every week is going to be when I go in. When I go in with that water, I let the water drain completely through the bottom, making sure that it's really saturated. Now, I have a very chunky soil in here, so it is very free-flowing, and I think that helps aerate the soil and probably why I do water this guy so often. But the easiest way to tell when your plant needs water is, as you may be able to see on this one, the leaves are going to kind of start curling in half. And in a perfect world, you're going to want to catch it kind of right before those leaves start curling up. Good rule of thumb is if the first couple inches of the soil when you stick your finger in are dry. But again, if you start to notice that leaf curling, that's when you're really going to want to go in and water it. So after this video, we will go water it. Funny enough, I actually always put off filming this video because it tends to just be weekends that I water this plant, and weekends also tend to be when I film videos, so then I water it and it's like dripping out the bottom and I just never film it. But we're finally doing it today. I was gonna water it first, but I knew if I did, we would never make this video, so yeah, don't mind the fact that it's a little curled up. Now, that brings us into humidity. So again, like I said, the places that these guys are native to are higher in humidity. However, if you are a long-time viewer of this channel, you will know that I live here in Scottsdale, Arizona. It is very dry. My relative humidity in my house tends to be somewhere between like 20 and 30% all the time. I do not give this plant any extra humidity, and overall, I have never had a problem. I don't have issues with browning. I don't have issues with the leaves getting stuck unfurling. It has been fine for me. With that said, would this plant probably like it if it had more humidity? Of course it would. Plants are going to enjoy environments that are closely related to their native environment, but with that said, again, this guy is very flexible, and if you do have a lower humidity, do not let that stop you from getting one of these. As for light, don't know this, but actually these plants happen to hang right there and right there. I have 2 of them coincidentally. And for me, they get a pretty solid, I'd say they get just a little less than a bright and direct light. They kind of get a moderate light throughout the day. That is fine for them. They would prefer a bright and direct light if you can give it to them, and of course if you can, they will grow faster for you, which is always fantastic. One thing that you will note if you're not giving them enough light is the new growth that they start to put out. Not only will it be leggier, actually let me just grab this other plant that I have up here. Okay, so when I say leggier, as you can see with this one that I have, basically what that just means is like down here, how you'll see it's a long stem and then it's a leaf, and then it's a long stem and a leaf. That's basically what leggy is going to mean. There's a couple things you can do to combat this in your plants if you're having this issue with other plants. One, of course, bumping up the light will help, but also if you trim this back, it's going to force the plant to push out more growth points in other spots and kind of get bushier as opposed to get longer. Now, it's just my personal preference. Honestly, I don't mind straggly plants. I kind of like my plants like I like my hair. I prefer them to be longer, a little more scraggly. Hopefully Brad Mondo is not watching this video, but yeah, that is just my personal preference. Of course, you know, you do you, whatever you think is best, but yeah, I just tend to like longer plants. So yeah, we're gonna put this guy here, I guess. We're just swimming in pothos over here. Okay, so back to what I was saying about light though. Yeah, they're gonna prefer bright and direct. Be sure not to give them too direct of a light. They can handle a little bit, but if you go crazy, of course, their leaves can get burned, especially if you live here in Arizona. You know how it be with our bright direct light. But yeah, again, overall pretty adaptable. Even if you can't give them a lot of light, they'll still do their thing. They'll still put out growth, and yeah. Now, one thing you may or may have not noticed as I'm holding up these plants is that like I kind of have gaps in the back of the pot. Now this just kind of comes, of course, I have them hanging and I'm not able to rotate the plants where they're hanging from, and because of that they're not getting sun on the backside, so growth isn't going back there. But also this was kind of a tip that I learned from Kevin over at Kevin? Yeah, I think that's his name. Over at Epic Gardening. By kind of forcing your plant forward, it basically makes it look fuller and longer and just bushier in the front. And if you're having it hang high enough, then it doesn't really matter if you don't have growth in the back. So that is just what I do with my pothos. And yeah, of course, if it's sitting more so on a tabletop like this guy's definitely a little newer. I got him only a couple weeks ago. But while his pot isn't super full yet, as you can see, he's more of an all around filled out area. So yeah, really just preference. But if you're hanging them, might as well give it a try and kind of clump your plant forward. One thing I do find about pothos in general in terms of like repotting, I know people ask about that a lot. I don't seem to find that they mind being root bound. I have had these in these pots for quite some time now, and oh god, we're attached here. They don't seem to mind it. Now, I again will say this, I know some people, you know, they have their routines and every 6 months or every year, whatever they do, they'll repot the plant no matter what. Really, my thought is if there's not roots growing out of the bottom, which there's not, and the plant itself doesn't seem to, you know, be declining or doing bad or slowing down in growth, I'm not going to repot it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. That is, again, my take on how I like to do my plants, but I personally feel like these are plants you don't have to worry too much about being root bound. So if you're trying to decide whether to upsize it or whether to leave it how it is, if it seems healthy, you know, just leave it how it is. In terms of propagation, these guys are very, very easy to propagate when you're doing it. Of course, this would be a great plant to propagate right now. You could just take a cutting somewhere along the stem and just make sure that you give yourself a node. Basically what that means is wherever you have a leaf growing out of, that is going to be a growth point, that is going to be a node, and when you do make that cutting, that is where your roots are going to come out of. So if you don't have one of those nodes or growth points, then you just kind of have a leaf and there's nowhere for it to root up from there. So if you are chopping your plant up, make sure that you are chopping it up with that in mind. One side thought I will give about pothos in general, not just Satin Pothos, but I did have it specifically happen with these plants, is that I find when I buy pothoses, I'm not sure, when I buy them from the nurseries, it seems like it's kind of common that they will just throw a bunch of like semi-rooted cuttings in there. With that said, one issue I did have with these ones specifically is they did amazing for probably the first 6 months that I had them. Around that 6-month mark, all of a sudden I had a bunch of growth right in the front here that just completely died back. And at first I had thought that it was because they were getting too root bound. I wasn't sure what was going on, but I ended up pulling out those sections and they were completely unrooted. They had basically just been cuttings that got stuck in there, and yeah, they had just never rooted. So again, this is something I've noticed when buying golden pothos and other types of pothos. So just keep that in mind. You know, it's not the end of the world, but I guess something to be aware of. Overall, these plants are pretty fast growing, and in terms of feeding them, I like to just go in and top dress them with worm castings every so often, and I notice once I do that, they seem to love it and they tend to really put out a lot of new growth anytime I go in and do that. So don't be scared to go in and feed your plant. You can of course use more of a synthetic fertilizer. I just personally am more of the camp of liking worm castings, but that is just me. As for toxicity, they are mildly toxic to both humans and pets, so it probably won't be a fatal situation if your pet or child or you eat them, but also probably not going to be ideal. So, you know, just keep that in mind and maybe keep them somewhere a little higher, like a hanging wall, like I do with mine. Okay, I think that is everything that I had to talk about with these golden pothos today. But as always, if you have questions that I did not address about them, drop them in the comments down below and I will do my very best to get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Thank you guys so much for sticking around. If you liked this video, hit the like button. If you are not one of those first 2,000 subscribers, then hit that subscribe button and perhaps we can get to 3,000. Thank you guys so much for sticking around until the end, and I hope to see you in the next video.